Today we're talking about Jesus and money, and I promise you it's not what you've been told. Because here's what most of us grew up hearing in church. Money is dangerous. The love of money is the root of all evil, and the closer you are to God, the less you should care about it. And honestly, that feels right. It sounds humble. It sounds holy. But here's the thing. Jesus talked about money more than he talked about heaven and hell combined. Over a third of his parables are about wealth, possessions, and financial decisions. So either Jesus was deeply concerned about something the church has been telling us to avoid, or we've been misreading him this whole time. I think it's the second one. I've gone deep into 4 of Jesus's most overlooked parables about money, and what I found completely changed how I think about finances as a Christian. This isn't a prosperity gospel pitch. This isn't give more and God will make you rich. This is just what Jesus actually said and what it means for your life right now. So let's get into it. 1. The parable of the talents, Matthew 25:14-30. Okay, so let's start with a parable that sounds familiar, but has a twist most people completely miss. In the parable of the talents, a master goes on a long journey and leaves 3 servants in charge of his money. He gives one servant 5 talents, which were large sums of money, gives another 2, and gives the last servant 1. Then he leaves. When he comes back, the first 2 servants have doubled what they were given. The master is thrilled. But the 3rd servant, he buried his talent in the ground to keep it safe, and the master is furious. Now here's what's wild. The servant who buried the money thought he was being responsible. He didn't lose it. He didn't waste it. He kept it perfectly intact and handed it right back. And yet Jesus frames him as the villain of the story. Most of us were taught to read this parable as being about spiritual gifts, your ability to sing, preach, serve. And yeah, that's part of it. But Jesus told this story using money on purpose. The modern equivalent of burying your talent looks like keeping all your savings in a low-interest account because investing feels too risky or too worldly. Not starting the business because you're afraid to fail. Not giving generously because you feel like you need to hoard every dollar just in case. The buried talent isn't humility. Jesus says it's fear. And fear-based financial paralysis, dressed up in spiritual language, is still just fear. The master in this story represents God. And the question this parable asks every Christian is, what are you doing with what God has entrusted to you? Not just your money, but your skills, your time, your opportunities. The expectation, according to Jesus, is growth, not greed, growth. 2. The parable of the rich fool, Luke 12:16-21. Now this one is the one that hit me like a truck the first time I really read it slowly. A rich man has an incredibly successful harvest. His crops are so good that he literally runs out of storage space. So he tears down his barns, builds bigger ones, stores everything up, and then says to himself, "You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." And that night, God says to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" Here's what's easy to miss. Jesus never says the man did anything wrong to earn his wealth. He didn't cheat anyone. He didn't steal. He was just good at farming. The problem wasn't the money. The problem was the monologue. Read it again. "I will tear down my barns. I will store my grain. I will say to myself." God is completely absent from his thinking. The wealth didn't make him evil. It made him self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency, the feeling that I've got this, I don't need anyone, including God, that's what Jesus calls foolish. This is the real warning about money that Jesus gives. Not that it'll make you evil, but that it can quietly replace your dependence on God without you even noticing. You wake up one day and your retirement account has become your actual source of peace, not your faith. The question this parable asks is, where is your security actually coming from? Because you can have a lot of money and still be totally trusting God with it. And you can have very little money and have made it into an idol, obsessing over every dollar, anxious all the time, unable to be generous. It's not about the amount. It's about where your heart is sitting. 3. The parable of the shrewd manager, Luke 16, 1-13. Okay, this is genuinely one of the strangest parables Jesus ever told, and most pastors just skip over it because it's uncomfortable. Here's the setup. A rich man finds out his manager has been wasting his money. He calls him in and says, "You're fired, but first, give me an account of everything." The manager panics. He's too proud to beg and too weak to do manual labor. So, before he gets let go, he goes around to everyone who owes his master money and secretly slashes their debts, cutting one person's bill in half, another's by 20%, basically to buy himself favor, so people will take him in after he loses his job. And here's the shocking part. When the master finds out, he commends the manager, not for being dishonest, but for being shrewd. And then Jesus says, "The people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light." Jesus is essentially saying, worldly people are smarter about money than Christians are. And that should bother us. The manager understood that money is a tool for building relationships and security. He used it strategically, even in a desperate moment. And while Jesus isn't endorsing dishonesty, he's pointing out that Christians often have a passive, hands-off, almost careless relationship with money. We feel like engaging with it too seriously is somehow unspiritual, but Jesus closes this parable with, "Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings." He's saying, be intentional with your money. Use it on purpose. Give strategically. Invest in people. Don't just let it sit there or slip through your fingers without thought. The modern Christian version of this parable is, stop being financially naive and call it faith. Budgeting isn't unspiritual. Investing isn't greedy. Giving strategically to things that actually work, not just out of guilt, isn't worldly. Jesus literally told you to be shrewd. 4. The parable of the prodigal son, Luke 15, 11-32. You've heard this one. Younger son asks for his inheritance early, blows it all on wild living, ends up broke and feeding pigs, comes to his senses, goes home. Father runs out to meet him and throws a party. But let's slow down on the money part of this story, because it's usually the part we rush past to get to the reunion scene. The younger son's spending was a symptom, not the disease. He didn't just lose his money. He lost his sense of identity. He started the story as a son and ended up spending his way into feeling like a servant. The money ran out because his spending was never connected to any real values. It was just about feeling free in the moment. Sound familiar? Because this is most people's relationship with money. Not catastrophically wasteful, but unintentional. We spend on whatever feels good right now, whatever gives us a hit of freedom or comfort or status, and then wonder why we feel anxious and empty at the end of the month. The turning point in the story, the moment everything changes, is when the son comes to himself. He wakes up, he gets honest, he stops rationalizing, and starts seeing his situation clearly. And then he goes home. Your financial habits are a window into what you actually believe about yourself and about God. The prodigal son's spending showed he didn't believe his father's house was enough. What does your spending show? That's not a guilt trip. It's an honest and actually very freeing question to sit with. So here's what Jesus was actually saying across all 4 of these parables. Money is not the enemy. Fear is the enemy. Self-sufficiency is the enemy. Unconscious, identity-driven spending is the enemy. Jesus never told his followers to be poor. He told them to be faithful, with a lot or little. To use what they have on purpose, to hold it with an open hand, to let their finances reflect what they actually believe. So the next time someone tells you that money and faith don't mix, remember that Jesus talked about money constantly, not because he was obsessed with it, but because he knew that you would be, and he wanted to give you a better way to think about it. If this hit you, share it with someone in your church small group or a Christian friend who needs to hear.